very early on the Sunday morning on an absolutely beautiful day, we followed Bob Burns out in his big Stessel to a reef that's fairly close to South Beach, just off Ballina. And we spent around about an hour over this reef with Bob Burns and Greg Baker, who is up from Adelaide on holidays, or was at that particular time, getting into a number of fish. Now, this is a very small reef. Bob was able to pick up quite a large stingray, and it was apparent from fairly early in the fight that it was a stingray, but Bob is a light tackle fisherman, and he had quite a fight with this stingray until he finally got it to the boat and cut it off and let it go. The next fish that he got onto really was a quality fish. It was a small blue groper, and when I say small, it probably weighed about a kilo and a half or 2 kilos, and it gave him quite a fight. But true to the current traditions of responsible fishermen, Bob also cut this fish off. He had no use for it for the pan. One fish really isn't enough, and we weren't there to take fish home. We were there to show you the sort of fishing action that happens off Ballina. So it really was an excellent morning. Spirit of Honda, the Honda Passport Dominator, which we used as a camera boat, performed flawlessly in the offshore conditions, and a great time was had by all. Now, during the Saturday, I also made the acquaintance of John Pratt, who's the captain of the Ballina Angling Club, and he said, look, I don't know if you know it, he said, but just out the back here, there are a couple of tributaries that run into the Richmond River, and they have a lot of bass in them. And I said, oh yeah, I've heard that before. He said, well look, don't worry. He said, we'll go out tomorrow afternoon, that was the Sunday afternoon, and we'll see if we can pick up some fish. Now, we went out around about midday, and this is what happened.
Now, Australian bass are an interesting species. This water is brackish, which means that, and it's tidal, it's a tidal creek, which means there'd be salt near the bottom and the fresh water would float on top, so it'd be a mixture of the two. And bass actually, whilst they're a freshwater species, or considered to be, they require moving brackish water in order to breed. Now, on a day like today where it's extremely hot, the bass won't be out in the middle of the stream. They'll hang underneath the trees that are overhanging the bank. So it's necessary to use the tidal stream to float the cork, and therefore the hook and the bait, in under a shaded part of the creek, and that's when the action is likely to happen. Now, several hours have gone past. We tried for a little while in the middle of the day without success, although there were a couple of bites, but we've come back late afternoon when the shadows have moved across the river, and the first hook-up, within about 5 minutes of dropping into the water, is this absolutely magnificent, if tired at the moment, Australian bass. Now, he really is a magnificent fish, as you can see. Bob is just netting him out of the river now. And there's an example of the sort of fish that you can catch in rivers that most people would not even dream would contain fish of this size and type. Now, just one thing I should mention is that these fish are not necessarily regarded as eating species, although a specimen of this size, properly filleted and skinned and perhaps marinated in milk or perhaps lemon juice for 20 minutes or a half an hour before you drop it in the pan, does make good eating. But really, they're a resource which is there for everybody to enjoy. They're magnificent fighting species, and it certainly is a great way and another way to enjoy the fabulous sport of fishing.
Now, as I said earlier, John Pratt from the Ballina Angling Club was our guide and our host for this. Jim McCollum is the man who caught the big fish, and Jerry Hillier from Bailey's Evercool, who is an absolutely fanatical fisherman and loves freshwater species, also made his contribution. Now, this type of fishing is truly superb. It's easily accessible. Be careful, though, that you don't trespass on private property. It's very easy to do that when you're following a stream along. Be always mindful of whether it's private property or not, and if it is, get permission from the owners, and enjoy this wonderful sport of freshwater angling, particularly with Australian bass. We'll be back right after this break.